Number 10. Always saying, I'm fine. We've all done it. Someone asks how you're doing and you throw out a quick, I'm fine. No drama, no fuss, just moving on. But here's the thing, constantly saying you're fine can actually be a big, flashing red flag. Psychologists call this emotional suppression. It's when you're bottling up your feelings instead of dealing with them. People do it to avoid burdening others or because they're scared of being judged. On the outside, they seem calm and collected, but inside, it's like a pressure cooker. Over time, this can lead to anxiety disorders or depression because those bottled emotions don't just disappear, they build up until they explode. Even worse, people who always say they're fine often become emotionally disconnected. They start losing touch with what they actually feel. Some even experience something called alexithymia, where you can't put emotions into words at all. It's not just being private, it's a mental block caused by chronic suppression. So next time you hear someone say, I'm fine for the 100th time, it might not be fine at all. Behind that polite mask could be someone struggling to keep it together, silently battling an invisible illness. Number 9. Being a perfectionist. Everyone admires perfectionists. They're organized, driven, top of their game. But perfectionism isn't just a quirk. It's often linked to serious mental health issues. Clinically, perfectionism is tied to obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, OCPD, and sometimes obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD. It's more than wanting things neat. It's feeling like the world will collapse if something isn't exactly right. These people can spend hours rewriting emails, cleaning already clean surfaces, or checking locks over and over. There's also maladaptive perfectionism, where fear of failure is so strong that people procrastinate or avoid tasks entirely. On the outside, it looks like laziness. Inside, it's crippling anxiety about not being good enough. This often spirals into depression, eating disorders, and even chronic stress-related illnesses. When you hear someone proudly call themselves a perfectionist, it's not always a humble brag. It could be a coping mechanism for intense inner turmoil, a desperate attempt to control life when everything feels uncontrollably wrong. Number 8. Extreme daydreaming. Everyone zones out sometimes, imagining winning the lottery or telling off their boss. But when daydreaming becomes too real or too frequent, it could be a mental health red flag. This is called maladaptive daydreaming. People with it can spend hours lost in vivid, movie-like fantasies. They create complex worlds, entire casts of characters, and detailed plots. It feels amazing, an escape from real-life problems, but it's not just harmless imagination. Maladaptive daydreaming often develops as a coping mechanism for trauma, loneliness, or social anxiety. Over time, it can replace real relationships and responsibilities. People skip meals, lose sleep, or neglect work just to stay in their fantasy realm. It's been linked to dissociative disorders, where the brain literally disconnects from reality to protect itself from pain. So, while occasional daydreaming is normal, if someone spends more time in their imaginary world than the real one, it could signal something much deeper than just boredom. Number 7. Laughing at the wrong time. We've all had that awkward moment. You laugh during a serious talk or giggle at a funeral because you're nervous. But when it happens often or uncontrollably, it might not just be bad timing. Psychologists call this inappropriate affect, and it's linked to several mental health conditions, including schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and certain types of neurological damage. It's when your emotional expression doesn't match the situation. You're cracking up while discussing tragedy or staying stone-faced during something joyful. Sometimes it's a coping mechanism. The brain tries to diffuse overwhelming emotions with humor, almost like pulling a fire alarm to distract from the real blaze. Other times, it's completely involuntary, caused by disruptions in brain pathways that control emotional response. People dealing with this often get labeled as rude or insensitive, which only makes things worse. In reality, they're fighting against a misfiring emotional system that doesn't let them react the way they want. What looks like a weird laugh might actually be a sign their mind is struggling to stay balanced. Number 6. Constantly helping others. Being helpful is usually a good thing. Baking cookies for friends, staying late to help co-workers. But when helping others becomes compulsive, it can hide a darker truth. This behavior is often tied to codependency or dependent personality disorder. People who suffer from it need to feel needed. They put everyone else first, neglecting their own needs until they're emotionally drained. It's not kindness for kindness' sake. It's a survival tactic for low self-esteem and fear of abandonment. Some even develop martyr complexes, where they unconsciously seek out relationships where they can save someone, partners who are broken, unstable, or abusive, because fixing others temporarily fills their own emptiness. To outsiders, it looks selfless. Inside, it's a desperate attempt to feel worthy of love and acceptance. Constantly saying yes and sacrificing personal well-being isn't just generosity. It's often a sign of hidden psychological wounds. Number 5, talking to yourself a lot. Whispering to yourself while looking for your keys. Normal, carrying on full conversations with yourself daily. That's when things get complicated. Talking to yourself can be a healthy way to process thoughts or rehearse conversations. But excessive self-talk, especially when it's argumentative or hostile, may indicate conditions like schizophrenia, psychosis, or severe anxiety disorders. Some people experience auditory hallucinations. They're not just talking to themselves, they're responding to voices that aren't really there. Others use self-talk as a way to control panic or intrusive thoughts. Over time, it can become compulsive, replacing social interaction with internal dialogue. This behavior is often misunderstood as crazy, but it's usually the brain trying to manage overwhelming stress, loneliness, or even past trauma. It's not just someone thinking out loud, it's a survival strategy for a mind struggling to cope with reality. Number 4, sleeping too much or too little. Everyone has sleepless nights or lazy weekends, but when your sleep patterns swing to extremes, it's more than just being tired or cozy. Insomnia, lying awake for hours, or waking up constantly is often a sign of anxiety disorders, PTSD, or manic episodes in bipolar disorder. The brain is overstimulated, flooded with adrenaline or racing thoughts, making true rest impossible. On the flip side, hypersomnia, sleeping 12, 14, even 16 hours a day, can signal major depressive disorder or other mood-related illnesses. The body shuts down, not because it's physically exhausted, but because the mind is overwhelmed and trying to escape consciousness itself. Even when someone does sleep, they may wake up feeling drained. That's because mental illnesses like depression disrupt normal sleep cycles, robbing you of deep, restorative rest. So while it might look like laziness or harmless insomnia, these patterns can be silent indicators that a person's mental health is unraveling in the background. Number 3, overeating or never feeling hungry. Eating habits can reveal what's going on in your head more than you think. Stress eating ice cream after a bad day? Pretty normal. But when eating too much or too little becomes constant, it often points to underlying mental health struggles. Binge eating can be tied to emotional dysregulation. Food becomes a coping mechanism, a quick hit of dopamine when emotions feel unbearable. On the other hand, losing your appetite completely can stem from severe depression, anxiety, or eating disorders like anorexia nervosa. What makes this tricky is that these behaviors often go unnoticed or are praised. People compliment someone who's lost weight, not realizing it's because they've been too depressed to eat. They joke about stress eating without realizing it can spiral into a full-blown disorder that's as serious as substance addiction. Your brain and gut are tightly connected. When mental health crashes, eating habits are often one of the first visible signs, even if no one realizes it's a silent cry for help. Number 2, avoiding social situations. Everyone needs alone time, but when skipping social events becomes the default, it's usually more than being introverted. Persistent avoidance of gatherings, phone calls, or even casual chats can indicate social anxiety disorder, agoraphobia, or early stages of major depressive disorder. For some, the fear of judgment or humiliation is so intense that leaving the house feels like entering a battlefield. Others experience something called anhedonia, a core symptom of depression, where socializing stops bringing joy. Hanging out with friends feels meaningless, draining, or even threatening. Over time, isolation worsens mental health, creating a vicious cycle that's hard to break. People often excuse this as being a loner or homebody, but in many cases, it's a hidden signal that the person isn't avoiding people. They're trying to avoid overwhelming fear or emotional pain. Number 1, overworking or being too busy. In modern culture, being busy is worn like a badge of honor. People brag about pulling all-nighters, working weekends, and answering emails at 2 a.m. But behind that relentless grind, there's often a serious mental health struggle. Chronic overworking is strongly tied to workaholism, which psychologists classify as a behavioral addiction. It's not just dedication, it's a compulsion driven by anxiety, perfectionism, or unresolved trauma. Some people throw themselves into work to escape personal problems, numb feelings of worthlessness, or avoid dealing with depression. This constant state of busyness floods the body with stress hormones, wrecking sleep, digestion, and even immune function. Over time, it can trigger burnout, a recognized mental health condition that feels like your brain and body have completely shut down. Even scarier, many workaholics don't realize they're struggling because society rewards them for it. Promotions, praise, and financial success mask the fact that underneath, they're mentally collapsing. That model employee might actually be a person barely holding themselves together with caffeine and desperation. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.